Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever else we are. If you're watching us live, please jump in and say hello. I'm David Shar here with Tammy Triolo for our second time, and this is a very unique Monday edition of Water Cooler Wednesday. Tammy was with us 2 weeks ago on our normal Wednesday slot, and a ton of people showed up, and there was a ton of great conversation, but we had some technical difficulties, so we didn't get the full Tammy. And when Tammy's in the room, you expect to get the full Tammy. So we are here. Tammy rocks. Yes, thank you, Lewis. I agree.
Thank you,
Uh,
Louis.
so we are here for round two. If you missed round one, great. Add to the conversation, ask questions, let us know your thoughts, and don't be scared to say things and ask things that you would normally be scared to ask, because this is a safe space for people who want to learn, right? And so if you were here last time and you didn't get your question answered, ask away, or whether you have new questions, Tammy's here for all of that. So, Tammy, for those of you that don't know, Tammy Trillo is the CEO and founder of PCQ Consulting, a firm committed to improving company culture and diversity in a sustainable way. Tammy has over 15 years of professional experience. She's worked in the healthcare space for over 15 years. Before launching PCQ Consulting, Tammy was an executive for a pharmaceutical company. Tammy's passion is people. She's dedicated to helping them thrive, not just survive in the workplace. And in addition to all of that, if you follow Tammy here on LinkedIn or other social media, you know that Tammy it has a presence. Tammy is unique and incredibly informative, and somebody that you need to be connected with. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that, David. That was sweet.
Thank you.
By the way,
So
I paid him for that, y'all.
yeah, right. No, but I've gotten so much free Tammy time. By the way,
Yeah.
I hope she's not sending me a bill, but I've gotten so much, including guests typically log on 15 minutes before to do the AV check, and last time Tammy and I were on 15 minutes before panicking about audio, visual, whatever it was, and this time Tammy was just going. I'm like, does she know I haven't pressed play yet? Like, we're not live yet. It was gold. So hopefully we can recreate some of that again. It's just she's always on. So um,
Yeah. Fortunately.
no, fortunately for us. So so Tammy, we were just talking about, and by the way, everybody who knows the rules of the regular water cooler knows that you've got to go through the 6 and 60, 6 questions within 60 seconds. We're not doing any of that. This is very free form because this is the special Monday edition, and you've already gone through the other editions. But during those 15 minutes, it was really fascinating. You were talking about how you show up to LinkedIn. And
Hmm.
I think that that's probably a good place for us to start, because that's really what like um, attracted me to you, and wanting to follow your content and have discussions with you, because you said stuff that nobody else was saying, and you showed up in ways that nobody else was showing up. Could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit to that?
So the reason why I show up in this space, the way I show up, you and I were talking backstage, and I said LinkedIn is still very much a very white conservative space, and I find that a lot of times people of color, Black people, show up, but they still show up very corporate, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to keep your job, you want to book clients, you want to get paid, and if you're going to do that, you're going to have to appeal to very white conservative corporate spaces. And for me personally, doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, the reason why I show up the way I show up, because I want to display the otherness of diversity. Not just you're hiring me because I'm Black, you're hiring me because I'm a woman, you're hiring me because I'm neurodivergent, or any of those things. I want to display the otherness of who I am, so people get to see what diversity really should look like. I find that a lot of times when companies hire people, they hire people based on quota. And that's why I say I do DEI in a sustainable way, because before you go out and recruit diverse candidates, what is your culture? And if you have a culture that's welcoming to everybody and the otherness of everybody, diversity, you will naturally attract diverse candidates because there's going to be something different about your culture that makes people say, I want to work there. So if you invite people or you hire people and say, well, we value diversity. We want more women. We want more Black women. We want more gay people. We want more Muslims. We want whatever your quota is. We want more of those people. We want to bring you to the table. But once you come to this table, conform to the culture of this table. And usually the culture of that table is still very white. So then you're not really doing diversity. You're doing optics. You're doing diversity optics, but you're not really doing diversity. And so for me, I purposely and I am intentional in showing up the way I show up because this is what diversity should look like. It should look like somebody that has the autonomy to say things that they want to say without fear of retribution for saying it.
Yeah. Right. Right. And but why don't you have that fear? I saw a discussion once on your LinkedIn. Somebody saying like, "How are you?" Or maybe you were sharing a conversation that you had had off the public space. But
Mhm.
what? How are you putting this all out there and still getting hired? Because if I feel threatened, I'm going to be less likely to hire you. Probably. I want the safe mayonnaise version of diversity, right? The
Right.
the thing that everybody will agree on and applaud.
Because I think what people don't realize is that from a management perspective, because those are the people that bring me into their company, right? So normally it's a VP of a company or it's the director that's saying, I want you to come in and talk to my department. I want you to come and do some training for my crew. Because what people really want is what I have to offer, but they don't know how to introduce that into their company that is still very mayonnaise and very safe. So managers, directors, and VPs will find me and say, okay, I need to bring you in. And sometimes it's almost like in the dead of night, I'm coming into some companies, right? Like
Right.
I'm not really coming in through the front door as of yet, but I want people who are in those spaces to not be afraid of using their voices because if you want diversity, honest diversity in your company, you have to be able to speak that. And you and I were having a conversation where I did a post and this beautiful sister meant nothing by it. She was just like, "Hey sis, I just want to tell you this. Maybe you shouldn't have that." And these things because even her as a Black woman understand that corporate is still very safe.
Mm.
And if you're a practitioner, that's where you're getting your bread and butter, right? You're getting it from companies. But when I go into these companies, I'm sitting with employees. I'm sitting with employees who are dying in the workplace and saying, I wish I could say that. And so part of me feels a responsibility to use my voice in that way because I do work for myself. Now, has that cost me some business? I'm sure, but I don't know, right? Like those people didn't first approach me and went, well, I went to your LinkedIn and now we don't want to work with you, right?
Right.
They just don't even bother with me. So I'm sure I've lost business, but I'm happy to use my voice for people who feel like they can't use their voice. And the amount of Black women, particularly, that get into my inbox and say, sis, please don't ever dull your voice. It's the thing that propels me to continue to use it. And, I'm just a firm believer in that. The people who were supposed to find me will find me, and the people I'm supposed to work with will come to me.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is I just leave it up to fate and God.
Yeah. And I've seen you have a real community of Black women. And
Yeah.
when we talk about diversity, we talk about all these other types of diversity. But I know that you have in the past talked about, well, we have to focus on Black diversity as separate from the others at times, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and I'm wondering, there's also something very unique about not just the Black experience, but Black women.
Yeah.
In every metric, Black women get the bottom of everything, right? So they're always the least employed, the first to
Yeah.
get cut out, the first to be
Yep.
discriminated against. What is it about Black women specifically when talking in the grander scheme of diversity issues generally? What is it about Black women? Because you have such a strong community that I just see on LinkedIn, with Black women who trust you and who you have. community and connection with.
If I can be frank, because we're dope as fuck,
Yeah.
right? Black women are just dope. And I think black women threaten the mediocrity of the people around them.
Hmm.
So typically we are the first to go. And what I've seen happen in the workplace is this dumbing down and silencing of Black women's voices.
Yeah.
I have talked to work with Black women who are so defeated in the workplace. And I'm talking about smart women, accomplished women, intelligent women who are sitting in positions but are silent, and they're silenced. So it's not just that they're silent, but they are silenced because Black women are just dope. And so if you're in a sea of mediocrity, they can't let you outdo them, right?
Hmm.
Like it's just impossible. And so I speak a lot for Black women because I was a Black woman executive, right? And I saw how I went from pet to threat almost immediately. And this happens to all Black women in the workplace. Most, well, let me not say all, but most Black women experience the pet to threat. So when you first come in, people love you because you are smart, you're intelligent, you're doing all these things. But the minute you start to really start to like own your space and own your intelligence, that becomes a threat to the people around you who haven't had to own their space or own their intelligence. And so you go from pet to threat. And so for me, showing up in this space as a Black woman, I completely and utterly get what their experience is like in the workplace because I've lived it and I've been through it. And so I use my voice as loud as I use it for Black women, but I do that for all women, right? Because white women, and I've talked about white women, how they have allowed themselves to be the tool for white supremacy in the workplace as well, in ways that they aren't even aware of. And I'm always going to be for women, all women collectively coming together and taking care of one another in the workplace. And I think white women can be great allies to Black women if they can get out of their own sense of insecurity around the brilliance of a Black woman in their space and say, how do I learn from you? And for that Black woman to say, how do I learn from you? Because one thing about white women, they know how to navigate corporate spaces in ways that we don't always know.
Mm.
Now, we can use that for one another if we can get out of our own way.
Right. But so somebody just added, I've witnessed Black women silence in the grossest, most violent ways simply for advocating for themselves.
Absolutely.
And I've seen this. So I have to say the one thing that worries me when we have diversity chats is that you can't talk diversity without stereotyping ourselves. The way we're talking about white
Right.
women, Black women, right? And we're
Yeah,
doing it
yeah.
for good, but also if there's a Black woman who doesn't fit any of these stereotypes that we're stating, then it's, well, what about me? And that really cuts deep into diversity. But one thing that I have noticed more often with Black women is exactly this. There is this sense of advocating for yourself that other women, other people might not do.
Don't have to
And
do.
it and
You don't
and
have
it's
to do it.
where that it feeds in that stigma of like the angry Black woman, because
Yeah,
somehow it comes across in this way where it feels angry to the other. And
yeah.
so, but if you shut them down advocating for themselves, what are you supposed to, like, how are they supposed to grow within an organization, or even coexist in an organization without stripping everything about themselves away?
Away. Yeah, well, this is the thing. And this is why I hate tone policing in the workplace, because tone policing is relative, right? So
Mm.
the way I talk, which is very direct and very frank, and I wrote a post about this, right? Like I hate nice. I do not like nice people, and I'm always wary of nice people because what nice people are trying to sell me is a version of themselves that do not exist.
Mm.
It does not exist. And it's why you're trying to be nice, because what you're trying to do is lure me into a sense of trusting you only for you to harm me. So I don't really like nice people. And I think Black people, particularly Black women, are very adept at finding nice and knowing it's not real. And if you have been doing nice your whole life and that's worked on everybody else, but it's not working on us, then we become angry. We become aggressive. We become
Mm.
not friendly. We
Right.
become not a culture fit. And it's only because we don't buy into that nice bullshit that you're trying to serve us, right? Because we know it's not real. And we know you can be nice to us today and be in HR tomorrow saying how we are
Right.
uncooperative, we're not team players, we always answer with an attitude. No, we're just direct in the way that we speak. And this is why I encourage everybody to put down that nice mantle, because it's not real. Because if people can get direct and honest about what's happening for them in the workplace, then Black women won't be angry. They won't be aggressive. You'll just be having a conversation with another Black woman. And listen, I can't even advocate enough for Black women in the workplace, because Black women on a whole will just be the biggest ally and support you could have in the workplace. And it really doesn't matter what your race and your gender is. If a Black woman feels like she can trust you and you're going to do right by her, she will do right by you. But a lot of times, a lot of people in the workplace view us as angry and aggressive because we are standing up for ourselves in ways they have not learned how to do.
Right, right. And so as a older white man, I just turned 40, but my hair makes me look 50. But as an older white man, I have seen, and I don't know if it's my own biases or I'm reading into things, I've seen that it takes work to build that trust with Black women.
Yeah, yeah,
That there's an automatic sort of distrust. I'm seen as the man, the system, the whatever, and it takes time and like hard work to earn the trust. But once it's there, it's exactly as you're saying.
it's there. And I think the way you earn trust, particularly with me, is I just prefer people to be honest with me
Mm,
in whatever stage that they're in. Whether it's I'm a full on racist, unlearning some things, I'm prejudiced, I got some biases, or I don't. I do better with people coming to me honestly, because I can work with honest, and I think Black women can work with honest. What we can't work with is dishonest. And again, I think culturally, corporate. The truth is, corporate is set up for us to be dishonest with one another. If we're
mm,
just going to be honest about that, right? Because if you want to advance in corporate, at some point, you're going to have to needle somebody. You're going to have to push somebody out the way. It's just set up that way. It's set up like a gladiator sport, but just with suits on, right? You're going to have to, in some way, needle somebody, push somebody, step on somebody's back, backstab somebody to get where you want to go. It isn't set up for people to be promoted and celebrated in a way that's transparent and open and honest. And I've always said, like, corporate, it's not even as much how well you work in corporate or how much you know, it's who likes you, right?
right,
And so
right.
everybody knows they're playing that game. And so if I know the way for me to advance is to get David to like me, I'm
Mm,
going to be in David's office. I'm going to be the one that's patting David on the back. And so people
right,
know how to play that game. And for a lot of Black women, that game is hard for us to play because genuinely we're just really authentic people. And so trying to play this corporate game becomes a head screw for us. So we would rather just leave and find something else
right.
than do that game and dance that other people are just willing and able to do.
Right. It's like a very deep form of code switching, right? It's not just
It's so,
needing to speak the right words, but it's also needing to transform to fit that
yeah,
culture. It's like the old American idea of America as a melting pot versus a mixing bowl, right? That
yes, yeah,
let's
yeah,
so we have two really good comments here. And I apologize to, it's
yes,
coming in as LinkedIn user. So if you
yes,
want to sign your things, please do. Otherwise, in LinkedIn, they're able to see who you are. And Black women advocating for fair treatment are dismissed as ungrateful, uppity, arrogant. Lots of trigger words
yes,
there, but absolutely.
yes. Listen, I've been
And
called arrogant a lot.
yeah, and Black women always had to overqualify themselves to even get a shot at the same start line as white people. Is that an actual white people? Is that
Yeah.
a thing?
Well,
But
here's the thing. Black people, even in this LinkedIn space, we've had to change how we even say white people because the algorithm comes down on us. Like you'll
yeah.
see white people or YT people. Like this
Oh,
is how serious it gets.
this is for real.
Yeah, no,
So
this is a real thing.
so this is a real thing. Like people will
Yeah,
write this. Like okay. So
yeah.
now I
People
have
were
to
right.
keep up with my kids like stuff on TikTok, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
all that stuff,
yeah.
but also this. That's okay.
Yes.
So I'm being educated as we go, and this is exactly what's supposed to happen. How do we circumvent this absolute apathy so Black women don't need 2 to 3 degrees to qualify? Great question.
So one of the ways you circumvent it is you have to not be afraid to be the person who doesn't have all the things that people say you need to have. You have to be able to go into a room and state who you are. I talk a lot about being a proud college dropout and how education is not the same as intelligence. You can absolutely question my credentials. You cannot question my intelligence at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't let anybody do it. I won't walk into a room and allow you to do that to me. And I think Black women have to get to a place where they literally advocate for themselves. I have been managed by white people in senior VP positions who did not have college degrees, and nobody said, well, how did you get that role? Nobody. So I don't walk into a space and think I have to have one simply because I am Black, right? And so some of it is a mental shift that we have to do as Black people as well. We have to shift our idea of what is acceptable and not acceptable. And when you shift your reality, you make people come into your reality of what's real for you. But as long as you allow somebody else to dictate what you need, who you are, what you have, you will always be led by the nose by somebody else's expectations of you. Don't
Right.
allow anybody else to put an expectation on you that you have not put on yourself.
Yeah, and this is sounding a little bit like imposter syndrome and also stereotype threat. That oftentimes
Yeah,
we will stereotype against ourselves because
yeah,
we're so ingrained to it, and especially when we are a token, right? So you're the
yeah,
only
yeah.
Black woman in the room. You feel
You feel the weight
you
of
feel
that.
that, yeah.
You feel the weight of that. And my last position, I was the only Black executive in that company, and I think there hasn't been another one since from the time I left, right?
Wow.
And so um I I didn't feel, I felt the importance of it for the Black women I was managing, but I never allowed that to weigh on me and how I showed up in those executive meetings, right? Like I just didn't, I refused to buy into this idea that I had to be perfect because I was the only Black person in the room of white people, especially when I know the white people were not perfect. So if
Mhm.
they're not perfect, I'm not setting myself up to be that either. If
Right.
I know that they're making mistakes with their departments, I didn't feel like I needed to be above anything else, right? And if they let me go, they let me go. If they fire me, they fire me. But I just didn't put that kind of pressure on myself. And I get that's not what I'm saying, may sound the most simple and basic and like, well, that's you, Tammy. Not everybody can do that, but it really isn't. If I walk into a room, I assume that everybody in the room is supposed to be there, and that includes me.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's where you need to start from. And
That's where I
they
start
might
from.
not know it, but you know it.
They may not know it,
Right.
but I know I'm supposed to be there in the same way everybody else in that room is supposed to be there, right?
Right.
And what people don't realize, because I've coached a lot of business professionals, particularly white women. I don't think Black women know how much imposter syndrome white women are dealing with
Hmm.
in the room,
And
and they're
even white
dealing with that
men.
simply. And if, listen, white men deal with it more than anybody else, but they're really good at masking it.
Right.
But just talking Black woman, white woman, I don't think a lot of Black women realize how many white women are sitting in that room fighting their own imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes when you are fighting with yourself for why you should be here, you can tend to turn outward and then focus your attention on somebody else and make somebody else's failure a big deal, or make somebody else's shortcoming a big deal, because then you don't have to look at your own self and deal with your own imposter syndrome. Everybody in the room is at some point is dealing with their own sense of imposter syndrome. So because I know that intellectually, I sit into the room and I go, what I'm feeling, I am sure everybody in this
Hmm.
room is feeling the exact same thing that I am. And so then that gives me a sense of ease. Like I don't have to be perfect because I know she's probably thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I can't believe I got this job either. Or this person is thinking, how did the hell I become the CEO of this company? Right. And I've worked for some CEOs that I promised to God they should have been asking themselves that question because they were just bad CEOs.
Right.
But what they were white men. And so even if they were bad CEOs, they felt an entitlement to be in that room and in that role. And so I walk into a room in that role with the same sense of entitlement.
Yeah. Yeah. So
You're supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be here.
yes, a mentor of mine, Dr. Juliet Aiken, IO psychologist, once said to me something along the lines of, "There are two types of people in the world. There are those who suffer from imposter syndrome, and then there are imposters." So,
Yep.
But
Yeah.
we have this. So this is back to the WTIPPO and YTPIPO. Black women online are trolled, received, have to find language to minimize that risk without being silenced entirely. Um, and then, and then they said, hit enter too soon. These non-colored folks are addressed so the algo doesn't come down on us. What do those mean? White people?
Yeah, white people, and male sapiens.
Mayo sapiens. Then they said, "LOL, not mayo." So I don't know what it was supposed to be, but mayo sapiens. I like that one. I could use that.
So
And
here's
then
the thing.
yeah,
So they
we
okay.
got a
So
big one
here's the
after
thing.
this.
Yeah, this one. I will say that the way that I protect my space and my peace, I am not afraid to block people. Not everybody is deserving of a conversation.
Mm,
And I think Black women have to get to this place. I have been, listen, I've had a man send me a video on LinkedIn that was so explicit about how he wanted to have sex with me. It was
oh,
disgusting. I sent it to a few friends and some guys that I'm friends with on LinkedIn. I'm like, watch this. And they were floored at what this video. I mean, he was graphic,
this
right?
is LinkedIn, not like
No, this
Instagram.
was
This is
on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
He
Yeah.
he he was graphic. I simply blocked him. And I will delete and block comments. I just don't give my energy to that. And it doesn't, because if I allow all that to come at me all at once, I promise you, you would get off LinkedIn, you would get off every social media platform because it's going to come
Mm,
at you. I utilize block and delete. I utilize it like I utilize it. And I
yeah.
encourage all people on LinkedIn, utilize block and delete.
Right. Right. And there's this very real difference between the things that make you feel uncomfortable in a growth oriented way and the
Right.
people who make you feel uncomfortable in a completely inappropriate way. So you
Yes.
make a lot of
Yeah.
people feel uncomfortable in a very different way. And
Yeah.
and the worst thing they could do, in my opinion, is to block you. Because if I'm reading your stuff and as a white man and I'm not comfortable with what you're saying, or I find myself getting upset or angry or justifying or
Yeah.
whatever, then I need to read more of your stuff because I need to
Yeah.
understand your perspective. And it's not that I need to completely conform to your perspective, but I need to
Right.
understand it and coexist with it.
Right. It's why I consume all kinds of content. There's
All
this
right,
phenomenon
there is
hired
the
at Fame.
phenomenon of mostly black women hired at bang bang companies as tech recruiters and HR staff versus anything else of more prominence in collaboration and actual tech work. Last hired, first fired. The most newsworthy was the developments in Netflix earlier this year. Bazoma St. John's exit, now former Netflix marketing chief, and many, many black women let go after being initially hired 6 to 3 months on the job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I recently heard about the term. It was actually a student of mine who, in their presentation, they taught me this term that was called it's the glass cliff instead the glass ceiling, and the glass cliff is this phenomenon where organizations that are like not doing well are more likely.
Hmm.
I might be butchering what this is, but I believe it's organizations that are not doing well, they are more likely to sort of promote a person of color or other minority into that position, setting them up for failure,
Hmm.
rather than when organizations are doing well, promoting people to that. So
Yeah.
it is like, let's give people these positions, but at the same time, sometimes basically setting them up to fail.
And he's right. It's funny because I can't tell you how many people I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and I see technical recruiter, and a lot of them
Huh.
are Black women. They are working for tech companies, and a lot of times they're recruiting for not high positions within those companies, right? Like they're not doing that, and I have noticed that, and it is an interesting phenomenon. And this is where these allies, they
Mm,
all exist on LinkedIn, but I haven't
right.
been able to point to one really, right? So a lot of these, so I want to talk a little bit like how DEI got colonized, right? Like
Yeah.
it's become very white field now. And
Mm,
what's fascinating to me is that DEI is possibly being led by white men, which is
mm,
wild to me, right? But a lot of companies are hiring white men to lead DEI. So you have all of these allies, because I would assume if you're a white person going into DEI, I assume you're going into that field because you believe in equity, you want inclusion, you want to see more people of color represented. But these are the same people, these white DEI people, that when it's time to cut and fire people, are approving all of the black people getting fired and cut.
Hmm. Hmm. I want to dive deeper into this because we promised them an uncomfortable conversation, and this is uncomfortable. So, um, I was recently asked, like, about an opportunity to do a diversity training, and
Mm-hmm.
my initial response to that was, I can't do that. Like, that's weird. But then I went back and said, yeah, but I'm part of that rainbow. Like everybody needs to be speaking out on this, etc. But then I went back and said, like, there's this very complicated thing, so like sometimes you get one side of the aisle where there's a little bit of like, not necessarily a love for people that aren't quite like you. But then you get to the other side of the aisle and there's this racism that comes from people who mean well, but it's really almost this hero complex. Like I want to help.
White
Like,
saviorism.
yeah, exactly, white saviorism, that I want to help black people, and it's not about them, it's about me,
Right.
and that's
I
an
want to
uncomfortable
help
space
you
too.
if it costs me nothing,
Right,
right? If it costs me nothing, I want to help you. But if
right,
it's going to
right,
cost me something, then I'm sorry. I mean, I have my family to take care of too. I have my bills to take care of too.
right,
I have my career to think about, right? So it's a lot of that.
right.
And so there was this post that came down, and it was a white gentleman that said that he's noticing that a lot of DEI is being overran by white men. And he goes, isn't that counterproductive to what DEI is? Like, how did we get here that
Mm,
white men are the chief DEI officers in the company, or diversity? Like, isn't that counterproductive? And one of my connections, and she actually just wrote a post, said, well, what about if the white man is disabled? And now I had a lot of feelings about that, but because she's a connection,
uh-huh.
I didn't go in. All I said is, this is a bad take.
Yeah.
You may want to reconsider that, but this is a bad take. Now, she got drugged all over LinkedIn, honey, because the black folks will get you.
Huh.
So she got drugged all over LinkedIn. And then I think 2 days ago, she wrote a post and she said she got it because diversity, equity, inclusion started from the basis of race. Like, that is the foundation
Mm,
for which this field or industry started out from, and then everything else, right? So it first started out about equalizing the racial field in companies, right? Then it expands out to women and to gay people and to neurodivergent people and disabled people. But the foundation of that is race, and you can't get away from that, right?
right.
And so she said, I get it, because what happened is black people do all of the heavy labor within the diversity field. Like, we did all that lifting, and then people with their own interests and their own identities come in, and then they just kind of walk through after black people, as one of my connections says, cleared the water, right? We clear the
Right.
water, and then everybody walks through dry.
Hmm.
So it's not that white people or disabled people or gay people can't do DEI, but you can't erase the foundation for why DEI even exists.
Right.
And the reason why DEI even exists was for racial equity within companies and corporations. So if that is the foundation, how much can you as a white man be advocating in that space?
Right. Right. But I would
I
make
mean, and
the
that's a question I want
yeah.
people to ask themselves. How much can I be advocating in this space? And is this me doing white saviorism, saying I know best how to help these poor black and brown people? I know best how to do that.
Right. So, okay, so let me make the counter argument. So my background is industrial organizational psychology, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
psychologists of all breeds, right? They like, clinical psychologists will help people with depression, even if they've never experienced depression before in their life. So if I'm coming
Mm-hmm.
to it from an organizational psychology, uh, like that's my angle. right? And that's
Mhm.
expertise I'm using is like this LinkedIn user. And again, I'm so sorry that names aren't popping up. Is that appropriate, or does it begin and end with the lived experience, which is, what this person I think is saying, right? That the lived experience should be, enough, and maybe the primary qualifier
Right.
for a DEI role.
So let me ask you this: coming from a psychological organizational point of view, do you think you understand completely why a black woman or a black man um should be in that role or in that space? Because it's not your lived experience, right?
Hmm.
So, and we talked about this, I think last time you were talking about, like, you're white but you're Jewish, right? So
Right,
there's still that otherness to you. So
right,
you don't think about being a man, you don't think about being a white man, but you
right,
do think about your Jewishness, right?
right, right,
So it's like me being hired by the Jewish Center for whatever as a black woman
right,
and saying, well, I'm just coming at this from an organizational point of view.
right,
And I may be able to do that, but I have no understanding of the Jewish experience in America
right.
and the nuances of that experiences of you being both white presenting and Jewish.
Yeah, well, this is only our second call. A couple more calls, I think you'd be more than qualified.
But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I will know to some degree from an
right,
academic right
right,
point of view. I probably could sit in a room and I can opine academically and
right,
intelligently about that experience,
right,
but I would have no reference point for what that really feels like. Back to the point we were talking about, right? The tone policing by the way which black people, black women communicate, and everybody else. Now you don't live in black spaces, you're not in black spaces, right? So how would you adequately know when conflict arises in an organization between black people, black leadership, how to navigate that? Because you're just talking from an academic perspective, something you read out of a book, right?
right,
There's
right.
no reference point for you for, okay, this black woman is speaking and I know that she's perceiving this as angry, but this is passion.
Hmm. Right,
Because
right,
all passion from black people to most white people is anger. But passion to another black person from another black person is, I know that that's just a passionate response to the question that I asked. You will sit there and view
right,
that as, well, I get you're passionate about that, but you sound a bit aggressive.
right, right. Yeah,
That
yeah, and
just will be your response to that.
right, you're missing those subtleties,
Those
and
cultural
which are
cues.
very,
You're
yeah,
missing those cultural cues. And you can't, there's no book that's going to give you that, right?
yeah,
One of the things I remember, so I posted about, like, we're going to talk about elitism and classism and
yeah,
stuff. I was on a podcast once and I was on with quite a few black women, accomplished beyond accomplished,
mm,
smart women, all of the things. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say there was some elitism and classism even among those groups of women about who thought they were the better practitioner and who had the better ideas and blah 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 blah. So I had said in that talk that when I go into companies, especially with leadership, one of the things I want to know is, what does your life look like outside of this workplace? Because there's a lot of white managers, leaders, and CEOs that talk about diversity in their boardrooms and their meetings and their one-on-ones and all these other things. But outside of that company, they go back into very white spaces, right? So there's not this emotional connection for why diversity matters, because you go back home to your white wife, your white kids, your white neighborhood, your white church, your white country club. Everything around you is white, right? So there is
yeah.
no diversity within your life. So there's not an emotional connection to this diversity that you are preaching and advocating in the workplace. So
But I
I said,
watched Cosby. I watched
right,
Cosby,
well, let me
Family
watch Cosby.
Matters.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, I've got it. I've
They
got
watch a
it.
few black shows, and that
Right,
qualifies. So
right,
I said, I always want to know what people's lives are like outside of that. And this one of the women, she was like, I don't care about that. That's none of my business. I'm just there to. I'm like, here's the thing: you
mm,
can write policies and procedures in place, but if you don't have an emotional connection to the thing that, particularly for diversity, because diversity is, I am asking people to come in spaces with me, and I'm asking these people to trust that I am bringing them into a company that cares about their experience. Well, if I have no reference point for what their experience could possibly be like, how much of that is really care outside of this is what we need to do, this is what we need to say?
Right.
And the dismissal to think that that isn't important was telling to me. And I was just like, again, because people lead with their academics and their, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, to your point, I'm coming from this from an academic point of view.
Right.
And and I know the reason why you and I get along is because there's a relationship between us, right?
Right.
And so even when I offend you, because there's a relationship between us, we can have those conversations. There's a reference point. You can come in
Right.
my inbox and say, hey, I want to ask you a question. This is tough. And even if you're unsure about how to ask that question, what you are sure is I'm not going to attack you over it. I'm not going to make you feel like, David,
Right.
you're asking something wrong and something stupid. I'm going to answer your question from the most honest place that I am, because there's a relationship. Now, when somebody comes up to me and they talk about Jewish issues, it's a little personal to me because I had a best friend that was Jewish for 18 years. So anti-Semitism hits me a little bit differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like on the surface, it's wrong. But because I have such connectedness to people who are Jewish, when I do hear it, it hits me a little bit differently
Right. It's
because
personal.
not only
Right.
right, because not only is it personal for me in the workplace, it's personal for me in my life. And so when I say when I say people have to think about what is that person's life outside. And as I was thinking about that, this video came down my TikTok, and it was this white mother. Because for everybody that thinks kids don't learn, racism is taught and hate is taught. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it is a matter of circumstance and the way the society is set up. So this TikTok comes on my video, and it's a white mother, and she said that her husband, and her child were in a mall. The child is 6. Now, you know how they have those playgrounds in the mall where the kids go out and play.
Right.
She said, we pulled up there and we sent our son to go play. Now, her son is white. All of the kids on the playground are black kids and other kids of color. The son walks up. He's 6. He walks up, but he disengages and comes back, and he sits down with them. And so she asked her son, why did you want to go play with the kids? And he said, well, I don't know. And she pressed him. Well, why didn't you introduce yourself? And she goes, well, nobody there looks like me.
Mm.
This is a white child at 6. Now, this is not
Yeah.
something that these parents taught in their
Right.
house. And she said, my husband and I, we looked at each other and said, this is a problem.
Right. Right.
This is a problem because he's othering himself at 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what they did was they moved to a more diverse neighborhood. She goes, because we lived in a white neighborhood. We went to white churches. All of our friends and family were white. So the only kids our kids saw were other white kids. So when he came in contact with kids who were different than him, he didn't know how to address these kids. He didn't even know how to play with them. And this child was 6. And this is very, very real. I have mixed kids, and I remember the moment my son realized me and his dad were different.
Huh.
And it was like I saw the light bulb go off, and my ex at the time was like, we were looking at each other. He was 4.5. We were at the pool, and we all come out the pool, and he's sitting in the middle of us. And he looked at his dad, and he was looking at his dad's like leg, his skin, because he's pasty white.
Yeah.
And he's looking at my skin, and he kept toggling back before, like back between us, like he's putting this connection, like something's different here, something's different. And we realized in that moment that he was putting us together in his head, that we were different. So kids will other themselves. So what she did was she said she moved into a more diverse neighborhood. She put her kids in a more diverse school because she didn't want her children at that age, othering themselves at that very young age to do that. And kids will do that. So yeah, I want to know what your outside life and experiences are, because that's dictating how much you truly care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because if you don't care about it in your own personal life, I do not buy that you care about it in the workplace.
Right. I think that that's a very powerful statement, because we do pick up on stereotypes so early in life. It's impossible not to pick up on them. And then the question is when those become prejudice. But even just the stereotypes themselves, there's this theory called contact theory, where when you bring people together from different groups, that's the way you start breaking down not just the prejudice but the stereotypes themselves. Because if I don't
Yeah.
have those experiences, then I'm believing everything I'm seeing on the news. I'm just, or in the movies, etc.
Everything is
But I
right.
wanted to share this. I thought it was a really like sums this up. Where do y'all keep your vehicle's registration? If a policymaker can't understand why I don't have it in my glove compartment, then they should social distance from a DEI role. And I think that that is so profound. And it reminds me of the first time I was exposed to children being afraid of the police. When I was growing up as a kid, the police were the heroes. They would show up to our school and everybody would rush out to see what's going on and to talk to them. It was practically like we wanted autographs.
Mm-hmm.
I then later owned an ice cream parlor in very close to the inner city of Baltimore. And it was the first time I saw police where they would walk up and kids, black kids, would be fearful of them. And
Terrified.
it was like it. I must have been earliest mid 20s, closer to 30s when I saw this for the first time, and this thing went off in my head. Like I never even like thought that that would be a thing, even though
Right.
of course it would, but I never it never even crossed my mind, and I certainly had never
Because
actually seen it.
it's because it's not been your experience.
Right.
And that's why I said I don't believe that white people can't effectively do DEI, but should they be leading DEI? No.
Yeah.
No, right? And I believe DEI should be done by committee, right? I think every voice in the room is always going to be helpful because even as a black woman, if I'm the head of the DEI department, there's things I am very gay. I have a lot of gay friends. In fact, most of my friends are gay, right? But I'm not gay. So that's not my experience, right?
Mm.
And how something is said or done is going to hit a gay person different than it's going to hit me as a straight person, right? Like I'm going to miss those things. If somebody is Jewish, if somebody's Muslim, if somebody is, Hispanic, Asian, there's going to be things that are going to be different. So I absolutely advocate for DEI by committee. I advocate for that because
Mm.
the more voices in the room, the better we all going to be. But to have the white guy at the head of this,
Mm.
especially a white guy who lives in suburbs, like where do
Right.
you live? Where do you live, sir? Do you
Mm,
live in an all-white
I'm
community?
not
Where do
telling.
you worship?
I'm not telling.
No,
No,
where do
but
you
yeah,
worship? You worship at an
right,
all white
exactly.
church? Okay.
Most
What country
most of
club do
my
you belong
surroundings
to?
are very similar to me. Yeah.
Right. That's just what it is. And last time we were here, and I was like, I like when white people say to me, I don't care about race. I don't see about color. And I
Right. I
ask
don't
them where
see
do they
color.
live?
Hmm.
Yeah, where do you live?
Right.
What's the makeup of where you live? Okay, you care about color. Church, where do you worship?
Right.
All white, you care about color. When you hang out, what country code, if everything around you looks like you, although
Mm.
you're saying you don't care about color, you built your life in a way that says you care about color. And
Right.
it's okay to care about that, but it's better to be honest about that, right? We were here last time. I was intentional in finding a neighborhood that was diverse. My ex and I, we were intentional in that, right? Because we did care about who our kids would grow up around and who they would see. We didn't want them just growing up with white kids. We didn't want them just growing up with black kids. We wanted them in a very diverse neighborhood where
Mm.
they saw kids who looked like them, who looked like their dad, who looked like my neighborhood is the most beautiful melting pot. And we were intentional in that,
Right.
right? And so if you live, reside, spend time with, and you're always in all white spaces, coming into the office is not going to radically change your view about the people you're purporting to advocate for in DEI. It just doesn't work that way. It
Right.
just doesn't.
Right. Right. And I think maybe this comes down to there's two very important things. There's representation that really understands, but
Yeah.
there's also understanding the building blocks of diversity, which are empathy. That even when I
Yeah.
don't understand, I can. I will teach you that even when you don't understand, even when something
Yeah.
seems off to you, that you can be accepting and an active listener and go through perspective taking and understand
Yes.
that maybe
Yes.
my first impulse is not always the right one, etc.
Right.
And both of those things I think are important. Would you
And
agree?
you have to be so self introspective of yourself.
Yeah.
To your point, is my first impulse, is that from my own programmed biases?
Hmm.
And this is how I want to respond. And if that's true, like again, the level and depth of introspection that you need within the DEI space is incredible. And the length of empathy that you have to have is also incredible. Because again, whether you're the black woman ahead of DEI or the white guy or the white woman, you're going to be dealing with diverse people. And it's so
Hmm.
imperative that you sit with these people when they're talking about the issues that they're having at work.
Yeah.
And even if you don't get it in that moment, give yourself time to process that instead of giving an answer right away that's going to dismiss that person because that's not been your experience. And one of the worst things I see happen a lot, and this happens in almost all organizations, and it really doesn't matter. The worst thing you can say is if I come in and I said, David said something to me that I found to be offensive or racist, and the HR person or the manager says, well, I don't think he meant it that way.
Right.
Well, first of all, I don't care what you think. I'm telling you what my experience with David is. And even if that's not your experience with David, even if you think that's not who David is, to dismiss my interaction with David
Right.
is not what you should be doing. And that happens a lot in the workplace where Black people, brown people, gay people, marginalized people, women talk about their experience in the workplace. And they often met with, well, I don't think he meant it that way.
Right.
I
Right.
think we should assume good intentions. And in my regular life, I do. I always
Yeah.
assume good intentions. And I will tell people to do that. But I can assume good intentions, but I could then probe, why was that said?
Right.
And then make you go back in and say, David, why did you really say that? Why did you really do that?
Right.
And it doesn't matter what your intentions are. If the impact of what you did is harmful,
Yes.
impact overrides intentions.
Right. Right. One of my favorite things to say is just because something isn't your fault doesn't mean it's not your problem. We very
Exactly.
quickly jump to, well, I didn't mean it that way. Well, they're being overly sensitive. But if the perception is there and that's not the perception that you intended, then you should want to jump to fix that. Right? You should
Yeah.
want to do that and internally because even if you think, oh, they're so wrong, that could happen again, and it's not
That
something
could
that you
absolutely
should
happen again.
be comfortable with.
And it may not happen with
Oh,
me.
yes, a
Well,
recording will be, as long as nobody writes white people so that the algorithm takes it down. If you keep with the codes, this will be up forever in LinkedIn. But we'll also have a recording if anybody wants to reach out for it.
yeah. Once you've harmed somebody, I think it's imperative to go fix it, right? And if you fix that, you learn something from it. And this is why I say, for me, DEI has to be about a culture shift
Hmm.
more than it is about the numbers of bodies of Black people, brown people. Because
Yeah.
what I do not want, I said this on, I wrote a post, I'm like, I don't even really get excited anymore. And it's not out of some hateration, please. I don't really even get excited when I see Black people announce that they were just, they got head of DEI or something else, because I understand the challenge they're going to be up against, because a lot of times companies will hire you to come into a table and then tell you conform to the table, right?
Right.
But they have to have, they have to say they're doing something for DEI. So we're going to
Right.
hire the safe DEI person. We're going to hire the one that is still very corporate, that's not very loud, that
Right.
doesn't challenge us. And I will say to companies, if you truly want to do DEI, you need to be hiring people that's going to challenge you. You
Right.
need to hire people that's going to call you out on some things that nobody's ever called you out on. And if the goal is, we want you to come in and see how you fit in this culture, you may want to hire disruptors to your culture.
Hmm. Right. Right. It's
Hire
it's
the disruptors to your culture.
yeah. It always goes through your head. Is this HR or is it PR? Right? Like, is
Yeah,
this just
it's
signaling
PR.
and checking a box? Right.
Yeah,
And then,
DEI is
but
PR.
yeah, but obviously the people who enter those positions, they're ready to make a change. And
Yeah,
so I can't even imagine the level of burnout when they realize that they're just running up against walls. And
yeah.
that's got to be.
The DEI positions, half of the time the companies never give you the budget. Everybody is safe. Like, being hired, I was fired. I was asked to disavow my activism by the CEO as a condition of being hired. I was fired 2 months later.
Wow.
Listen, let me tell you something. Companies don't really want DEI. Companies want the illusion of DEI, right? And again, this is why I say to you, David, this is why I show up in the space the way that I am. Because if you engage me for work, I want you to know who you're getting. For as much as I am trying to appeal to companies to do this work, I'm also trying to repel the companies away from me who do not want to do this work,
Right.
because those aren't the companies I want pursuing me. Those aren't the companies. One, they're not going to hire me. But I don't even want them thinking they can even recruit me, because I'm not going to do your bidding of continuing to hurt people. And for a lot of Black people, there's a few friends I have in DEI. I'm like, listen, go get the money, go get that corporate money, because you know what it is.
Yeah.
You're not there to affect any change. So if they're
Oh,
going to pay you a six-figure salary and give you a nice office, get the money, and then find something fun to do with your life, right?
oh
Because
my God, that
you already
pains me so much to hear you say that. But I understand that too often it's the reality.
that's the reality of it. Like, go listen, take the job, get the money, and then go find a hobby, because you're going to need to find a hobby, because just going in and out of the office every day, knowing that these people have no intentions to do DEI in a sustainable and meaningful way, is defeating. It is defeating. But you need to have a job, you got to pay your bills, so go find a hobby. And I tell this honestly to Black people, because a lot of companies don't want it. And I think the companies, when I first started my business, that I was targeting specifically were startup companies, because I felt like they were in the best position to get this right. Right? You're just starting a company. You
Mm,
have the ability from the ground level to get this right. But those startup companies, a lot of times people are so busy about trying to turn a profit that they just do what the formula is, right? And so the formula is, you hire a bunch of people with a bunch of degrees and knowledge and whatever that comes with, and you just keep plugging along until you can make some money. And then by the time they try to look back and try to do some culture work and try to do some DEI work, they've had 3-4 years of creating a culture that they didn't want, because they didn't start from that ground level up. And companies can do this. It's the willingness to do it. And there's a lot of people sitting in these companies with the position to hire me, or a Teresa Robinson, who's also a very loud voice in the DEI space. Their positions to hire us, but hiring us puts them a target on their back, and like, why'd you bring these people in? So
mm,
people are afraid. And I get that. And it's why I use my voice the way I use my voice, because I know a lot of people can't.
right. Yeah. So a lot of times the advocates are the ones that don't look like you. It's a little bit safer
Yeah.
until it isn't for
Until it
them
isn't,
to do
because
that. Right.
eventually they're gonna back you out too. Like, this is why I try to tell people, like, you're only safe until you're not.
Right.
You're only
Right.
safe until you're not,
And then you
because
know who your friends are. You know
and
who
then
the
you know who
real
your
allies
friends are.
are. Yeah.
Who.
So
Listen,
right.
I say all the time, David, like, I write a whole lot of, I do my thing. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people. I remember asking a group of Black women, I said, there's a lot of white people on our content, a lot.
Mm,
And I'm talking about people with CEO, VP. How many of those white people that are in the crowd clapping for our content, how
yeah.
many of those people reached out to hire you?
Right.
And all of us went, none,
Right.
none. But these are the same people that will say they're allies.
Right. Right. What I often hear people say, "Show where are your receipts" or "Show your receipts" when it comes to
Show me
DEI.
your receipts,
Yeah.
babe. Show
Yeah.
me where are the receipts?
Right.
Where are the receipts? I've had people, I have one lady that I'm friends with on here, and she's never really on LinkedIn, but I promise you, every meeting this woman goes into, and she's a white woman, she doesn't post on LinkedIn. Every meeting she goes into, when she closes her deal, the next conversation she says, what's going on with your culture?
Mm,
What's your DEI looking like? Okay, you need to call Tammy. I can't tell you the
that's
amount
cool.
of referrals and meetings that I've had from this one white woman. And she's not on LinkedIn. You won't see her on any of my posts. She
Yeah.
doesn't comment, she doesn't write. But every deal she closes, she takes me in the room with her. Every deal.
Hmm. That's an advocate.
That's
That's
allyship,
amazing.
right?
Yeah.
That's allyship, and that's how you do it. And there's a lot of people that are in the position to do that that won't do it, right? But they'll be on our comment section doing the
Yeah.
thing.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what I
they
mean?
will. So okay, we used up an hour. This is like now 2 hours or an hour 45 minutes of content. Even if the first time the content was like choppy and I had to do a couple dances when you dropped off, but it's amazing that I feel like we still have only scratched the surface. I want to look at these final last two comments that I'm seeing, and then we'll talk next steps. People are inherently afraid of difference. I think that society leaders needs to be more intentful about diversity. Having different ERG are great, but you begin to preach to the choir. Less ERGs with more diverse topics. Hmm.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
this one, I don't know what that website is, so don't click on it. Like, I'm not saying click on it. Could be a virus. I don't know, but just
Yeah.
reading the Carlton Banks Urkel acceptable. Uh, I think I know what's there. That's fascinating. That's kind of what we were talking to, and they only hire the likes of Carlton and Urkel for DEI roles because they're corporate. Mm,
They are corporate. They are corporate.
yeah.
There's a lot of Black people that are in DEI roles that suffer from classism and elitism, and we can't pretend that that's not a thing either, right? Because I work in the space, and I've come across a lot of them, and those are the people who have been willing to conform, and they, as much as a lot of times white companies don't want to hire the irreverent DEI person, there's a lot of Black people that won't either, because they have gotten their seat and they're not going to let anybody ruin that for them. And they will say that. And again, I respect the game. I get why people do that, but I will say to those Black people that you're probably doing more harm than good. Like, you're taking care of yourself. And I get that. Like, but I would hope that people go into DEI for the purpose of taking care of people outside of themselves as well, right? Because you can do both, but it takes a bit of courage to do that. It takes some courage to do that.
Okay, so I know that if you can't get enough of Tammy, I can't just keep bringing her back every week, or she will start sending me invoices. So you could take your phone and hover it right above Tammy's head, and then click on it. Or if it's an Android, it might work differently. But I should figure out how it works on Android. Speak of diversity, I only speak to the iPhone holders. But but definitely follow Tammy right here on LinkedIn. Check out her website. She, as you see, she's got so much to add. The QR code on top of my head, by the way, is where this video will live on in addition to LinkedIn. And you can check out the last episode. There should be a water cooler Wednesday link there. So you get a whole hour and 45 minutes of Tammy. But I feel insecure saying that because I'm the white man capitalizing on the Black woman now. And that's why did we just say don't do that? But I'll show you the receipts. You want to
show
challenge me? I'll show you the receipts.
show
So
them the receipts, David.
um, next time, which is not next week anymore, it's actually in 2 days because we don't normally do these on Monday. But this Wednesday, 2 days from now, please come back as we talk about integrity, something that is clearly linked to the things we talked about today. But we're going to be talking with Tate Linden about his organizational integrity lens, the Linden's integrity lens, and the link of organizational integrity to sustain success and healthy culture. You're not going to want to miss that one. Tammy, you're back on camera. You look down
I'm
for a
back on
second.
camera.
So I should have warned you. So there's nothing to see here. So, thank you so much, Tammy. We really, really appreciate you coming back. Like, coming once was amazing, and then coming twice is like, that's really, really amazing. And then having all these people show up for you both times is really a testament to the fact that people are thirsty to talk about this in a real way, and that's what you provide. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for having me back. Like I said, last week was vacation, and the Wi-Fi was just terrible. And for the people that showed up to this talk, thank you so much. I appreciate all of you guys that follow me on LinkedIn and engage with my content. I really, really appreciate every single one of you. So thank you.
Yeah, and if you find Tammy on LinkedIn and her content makes you upset, please keep reading her content.
And get in my inbox. Like David will tell you, I'm super approachable. Now,
Yes.
if we get to, you may get to billable hours, so don't abuse it over there. But definitely get in my inbox. If I write something or say something that triggers you, or offends you, or makes you think, and you just want to have a conversation, I am always up for conversation with people who want to learn how to be better, and for each other in the workplace. That's what I do.
I was commenting, Tammy, right before we hopped on here, that she has this unique gift toward making people comfortable and this unique gift toward making people uncomfortable almost simultaneously. But I think
Yeah, you did say
that
that.
goes back to her whole thing about being kind, and really when she's giving you a dose of medicine, it's for your own good. So
Yep.
and for the good of all of us. So thank you all so much. We will see you next time this Wednesday. Bye.